our first look coming through the crowds as our troops are ready for war. The plate and armor knights, and my god, does it look beautiful, especially with the sun glinting off the armor, the plumes and feathers on each of the helms. This is the Del Arte della Guerrilla mod, and my god, does it look amazing. I've been waiting for this for quite a while, and we've had some bits and pieces here and there in terms of gameplay, but nothing all that massive. This is one of the first things that was actually released. This mod is going to take us into the 15th century, during the later stages of the War of the Roses. Initially, it was going to be a little bit bigger than the scope that we're going for now, but there's still a lot here to get our hands on and to take a look at. You can see the enemy cavalry in the background there forming up, and my favorite part is the variation of the infantry. You see, back in the day, everyone wasn't so uniformed as we see in games like the Total War franchise. In those titles, everybody seems to be wearing exactly the same thing, they look very similar, and they have the same weapons, but that just wasn't how it was. A lot of the time, you wouldn't even be equipped by the state themselves, it'd be what you could afford and what you had. The richest would be cavalrymen, the weakest would be skirmishers and archers. We can see some archers at the back also having some beautiful long swords. I think there are crossbows within this mod as well, however I'm not entirely sure we're going to be seeing that here. These guys look some man-at-arms at the back with their, well, it looks like moored howl grips, half swording. We've got some poleaxes there as well, and here come the enemy infantry up to the front. The cavalry battle seems to be raging on in the corner there. It's still uncertain to see who's winning this, but it looks like it could be going our way here. I love the plate armor. I think that is one of the coolest parts of it, and we've had many screenshots of different bits of plate armor to show off, and the intricate details on all of it, depending on how wealthy a person is, depends on how well intricately designed their armor looks. The cavalry, of course, has charged into the fray, and in true Mount and Blade fashion, it all goes tits up. Everybody is slicing and dicing, and especially without any HUD on, it is almost impossible to see who the enemy is, and this was an issue back in the day. Of course, people wore certain plumes and uniforms in order to signify their sides, but there was a lot of similar variations in armor and weaponry, so it could have been very tricky to see, especially if you're not forming a front line, which in this case, because it's Bannerlord, that's not going to happen. That's something that I'd really like to see, is some sort of improvement in terms of the formations. There are numerous amount of mods that have tried it. Some of them have been more successful than others. Things like the spear bracing mod have done a decent job of trying to make it so people actually use weaponry realistically, but there's still nothing all that perfect, and I think a mod like this would definitely benefit from it, because, you know, using it without the HUD is the preferred way. It looks awesome and it looks so cool and cinematic to be able to do this, but it doesn't seem all that fair or possible on the battlefield. The banners, however, do seem to be something that are implemented within the Del Arte Guerrilla mod anyway. These are not things that are used by a separate mod like Raise My Banner, which is a mod that adds in these other sigils and things throughout Bannerlord. This is also an implementation within this modification itself. The front line seems to be forming a little bit better. It seems like the bloody mess in the middle has died down somewhat. There's still a few bits of cavalry in there, but it's mostly infantry fighting. There are some archers at the back there that are going to need to be dealt with, however. The blood, the gore everywhere. Of course, that's just part of Bannerlord's blood and gore patches, but my god, does it fit well with this mod. I don't know if you just noticed what happened there, but as you see, we're controlling this one character, and as soon as they go down, we control a completely different character. Okay, we're in command of this guy with the helmet on. He goes down, and now we're in command with the guy with the other helmet on. That was the smoothest transition I think I have ever seen. Jesus Christ, man. More reinforcements have spawned in as the battle grows and grows, and it's going to get bloodier and bloodier as we go on. It looks like our team is doing a pretty good job, though, and they seem to have wiped up. Now, of course, this is footage from the developer themselves. The mod isn't out yet, but I think we need to go into a little bit more detail about what we can actually expect from Del Arte della Guerrilla. Here we have a little bit of a darker and more cinematic bit of footage. This is following the faction of Lancaster. Of course, the War of the Roses with a spite between mostly Lancaster and York. We will also get the inclusion of the Wales, Scotland and Ireland factions, and you're going to be seeing some mercenaries from the continent, such as the Flemish. Arrows are whizzing past the head of our player here as they charge into battle with some new armor. My god, once again does it look really cool. But because it's Bannerlord, the shield wall breaks, the lines have not been drawn, and nobody knows whose side anyone's on. The banners, though, once again looking really great within this modification, and showing and indicating some sort of idea of where your teammates are. There are so many features that are planned for this mod. There's a whole new recruitment system similar to that of 1257 AD mod that was from Mount and Blade Warband. It's pretty different to Native's recruitment system, and it means that it's trying to go on a more realistic angle. For example, only vassals and leaders of factions can recruit troops, and if you're an unaffiliated player, for example if you haven't aligned yourselves with the York or Lancaster, you won't be able to recruit from factional soldiers. You won't be able to go into someone else's town and take their troops, because that's not exactly how it worked at the time. We can actually see some gameplay playing as York, and the introduction, if you can hear, of some hand cannons or basic gunpowder units, which yes are within the game. We've actually seen some gunpowder units within Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord before. It's been in a few and numerous modifications, but this is the first time we're really seeing it being used in a setting that makes sense historically and works with the other troops and the overhaul surrounding it. I love this tunic. It is so well detailed and so bright and colourful, and that's something that's often gone amiss in these medieval kind of modifications. This Hollywood depiction makes people look at the medieval world as so dark and dingy, and whilst it was a bloody and horrible time for many, there were all these beautiful colours, and that's how you would signify your own players on the battlefield. I mean, I love the lances as well. They look goddamn cool. We also have a few screenshots here, a closer look on what the actual scenes are going to look like that we're going to be playing as. Our first seems to be more of a monastery garden. The design and the architecture on this is very tastefully done, although you can't see through the windows, but I'm sure that's something that's going to be coming later on, or it's going to be some enterable buildings, which would be nice. The further village gardens are really nicely designed, and it very much reminds me of that late medieval and Kingdom Come Deliverance style. The plate armor, the villages, the serfs, the peasants, the lords, the castles. It is one of my favorite times to recreate. The smaller stone walls outside these villages, and the design to try and make it as historically accurate but also look good within the game. You see, you've got to also take into account that Bannerlord is just a game that has limitations, and of course its engine isn't perfect yet. And whilst modding tools have improved massively, there's still a lot to work on. We have a few more screenshots of the troops and armor that are going to be able to use, once again, incredibly colorful, incredibly bright, and something that is going to look really nice on the battlefield and a little bit different to what we've experienced before in Mount and Blade mods. We get some further looks of the villages, some of a smaller scale, less of the cathedral kind of stuff, more of the small village chapels as well, farms, courts, squares, all that kind of beautiful thatched buildings as well. This mod is not going to be a small feat, and whilst the scope has changed somewhat from when they initially started and they're doing a few less factions, they're still planning on overhauling all of the towns and the villages within Bannerlord itself. The good thing about doing something in this time here, the 15th century, means that there will be some relation to Mount and Blade and the native title. You see, many overhaul mods have to completely change assets and pretty much everything within it in order to fit a new time period or even a fantastical setting. But a mod like this, because it is still based with medieval just a bit later on, means that many of the assets, the buildings, the architecture, and even some of the weaponry will be able to be reused. We now get a little bit of a later look at some of the troops and armor, a little bit closer up. The plate armor once again looking fantastic, the weaponry, the sigils, the pole axes, and of course, the beautiful royal cavalry. Granted, this mod hasn't had many updates in the recent few months, but it seems like this is a massive task to be working on. There is so much here to get our hands into, and I can't wait to see more information about it. I think this has the potential to go a lot further than many other modifications, since we saw, especially in Mount and Blade Warband, some of the most popular and long-living ones are ones that weren't too far from the original game. They spiced it up, added new troops, new mechanics, such as the recruiting mechanics we're going to be getting within this modification, and they just improved upon native Bannerlord, and that's where you get the most effective modifications, because Bannerlord and Mount and Blade is such a solid game in itself, so it doesn't take much to change, and it just adds a new lick of paint, a new refreshing look at the title. Also, I don't know if you've noticed the size difference between some of these guys. The main character themselves is, well, I would say a regular height, but some of the guys in the troop and the rank and file look absolutely tiny. Maybe they're just kids, or maybe they do have some sort of dwarfism. Who knows? Maybe maybe that's just a feature. Some of the things I'd love to see a little bit more is how musketry works, how some of the gunpowder weaponry works, and whether we're going to stick to hand cannons or maybe even go a little bit later into the future as well. There's going to be a lot to be said about the variation between the factions. Of course, we are based within War of the Roses, so most people within England at this time had very similar weaponry. That was just how it was. How is that going to translate within Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord and this modification in general? Well, I guess we're going to have to wait to find out. This mod has a lot going for it, and I'm going to be keeping you updated with it in the future. So make sure you stick around the channel if you want to see more of that stuff. But leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Click the link in the description if you want to go and check out the modification page itself. But until then, I will see you in the next one.